Iowa is just hours away from kicking off its Democratic nominating contest. Candidates are making their final push to rally support before people from across the state gather and vote, but not on ballots, but with their feet, moving into groups for each candidate.
As Major Garrett reports, this happens in arenas, schools, firehouses, gymnasiums, a tiny bar even, in the middle of farm country.
Grant, Iowa, 90 minutes west of Des Moines and surrounded by corn and cattle fields, is one of Iowa's smallest towns. Population 90. This year, for the first time, Grant will hold a Democratic caucus. The venue? The Hayloft, a rustic bar and grill where farm antiques are plentiful, and a hamburger goes for $2.50. Zelda Schwartz, age 74, has run the place for 48 years.
So you know most of your customers?
Oh, yes. I pretty much know what most of them's going to eat or drink. And
When Grant's Firehouse declined to host the caucus, the Democratic Party asked Zelda.
I'm going to be very honest. When he first called me, he didn't say they were Democrats, but that made no difference to me.
It may not have made a difference, but there is a difference.
They're Democrats and I'm a Republican.
You welcome them with open arms?
You bet. I've met a lot of them and they're all very nice people.
The Hayloft will be one of 1,678 caucus sites in Iowa's 99 counties. Those who attend will align into candidate preference groups. To qualify for delegates, a candidate must receive at least 15% support at each site. If a candidate doesn't meet that minimum, those supporters can pick another candidate. This is called realignment. Troy Price is the Iowa Democratic Party chair.
We at the party have been preparing for record turnout plus from the very beginning. And so when we started putting this process together back a year ago, we went to go get the biggest rooms.
Zelda will host the caucus in the Hayloft's roomy and knick-knack-filled back room.
Do you have any idea how many people are going to show up?
No, I do not. They could seat 125 people.
More than the whole town, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, right. So for more on the Iowa caucuses, we're joined by CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. He is in Des Moines, of course. So, Ed, the Democratic Party is trying something new in the Iowa caucus. What's the change?
A few changes, Anne-Marie. Good to see you guys. First of all, they're going to release the results, the raw vote total from that first round that Major mentioned, to give us a sense of who got how much, regardless of if they got 15%. Then they will release the final round number, the raw total again, to give us a sense of who actually prevailed. And then they'll give us a sense of how many delegates are going to each of these contenders. Why are they doing that? Because in 2016, there were concerns that the party was putting its thumb on the scale for Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders supporters and other fans of transparency said, why not just put it all out there for people to see? The concern for some of the campaigns is that somebody who does very well in that popular vote total in the first round might try to declare victory off of that. But remember, a viewer's guide, it only matters in terms of delegates tonight who won the Iowa caucus. The other thing that's interesting, caucuses are held at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 7 here in the Central Time Zone. One time, it does limit the participation of people who have to work at night or can't get out in the cold. They are holding what are called satellite caucuses. Several here across the state this afternoon, some even in other parts of the country and the world, where Iowa Democrats will be able to gather and pick a preferred candidate.
So, Ed, nobody does this better than you explaining to our viewers how this all works. Just drill down and explain why the Iowa Democratic Party are releasing these 3 sets of results and what kind of role they will have on the upcoming caucuses and primaries in New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada.
Well, they only reward 41 of the more than 3,000 delegates that Democrats dole out ahead of the convention, and you need about 1,990 to win. So there's only about 1% of the delegates at stake here tonight, despite all the attention that's given to this state. Again, the raw totals are being released because there were concerns 4 years ago that the party may not have been totally straight with people about how it is that Hillary Clinton ended up winning. So the idea is to let everyone see all the math, but again, only focus on that delegate count. There is concern among some campaigns that, let's say, Bernie Sanders does very well in that first round of voting and may also prevail in the second round, but for whatever reason, and there are reasons, he doesn't end up with the most delegates. And the reason that could happen is because, let's say he does very well in a populated county of here in Des Moines or in Iowa City. Well, each precinct in each county is only awarded a certain number of delegates, no matter how many people show up and no matter how much you win by. If your support, however, is spread out broader across the whole state, you could win more delegates that way. And if you look at the CBS News Battleground Tracker results that we put out yesterday, it shows that Joe Biden's support, for example, is far more generously spread across the entire state, whereas Sanders appears to be bunched up in Des Moines, Iowa City, Ames, Cedar Rapids, areas where there are younger voters, more college voters, and people who are going to caucus for the first time. So there's concern that certain campaigns might come out and say, look, we got more votes, but you didn't get all the delegates. And that's just the funky way that Iowa does it.
Well, so that's an interesting point, Ed, because what's the byproduct of a campaign blasting out that, you know, they won, Iowa won, I put in air quotes, without really having all the delegates? Could that, for example, dampen turnout later on in the day or in the evening?
Yep. And that is why they don't want them to do it. But the numbers will be there for them to do it if for whatever reason, the first round math is breaking in their way. These are the kinds of headaches and debates that Democrats have amongst themselves. And I suspect 24 hours from now, we could be looking at some of this math and see certain people arguing that they won when in reality they didn't. The only number that matters tonight, folks, is the delegate count.
Good point.
Oh, that's so interesting. So over the weekend, it was crunch time for the Democratic candidates. 4 out of the 5 are senators, top 5 are senators, and so they had to sit out during the week. So what were they busy doing during the final moments leading up to today?
Meeting with as many voters as they possibly could, Anne-Marie, and when one sign of how desperate they were to do that, remember we've done stories, we've talked about the fact that Elizabeth Warren has spent almost a year taking photos with supporters, and they have a very elaborate system to do that can take several hours in some cases. Well, this time over the weekend in several places, she was only taking group photos with dozens or hundreds of people at once because she had to rush out the door to get to another event. She left her dog behind, Bailey, to take individual photos with people if they so chose.
That's pretty funny. So what are you hearing in terms of how this is all going to play out?
Yeah.
I find it really remarkable, Ed, that former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg is not focused at all on these early states. He's not worried about Iowa. He's not worried about New Hampshire. As you point out, it represents such a small percentage of the overall delegate count. I guess I'm trying to understand, does it make sound political sense to say, look, Florida and California, we're talking about, hundreds of delegates. I got to spend my money there. Florida is all about these 30-second ads, I'm told, right? Where Bloomberg has the money to spend, and coupled with that he's getting into the president's head. You see the president tweeting more about Michael Bloomberg, making comments more about Michael Bloomberg. Does that make sound political strategy to you?
It would make sense if on March 3rd, Super Tuesday, he is winning at least 15% of the vote and starting to amass delegates. Those are the states he's competing in first. There's 14 of them, plus America and Samoa. That's where most of the advertising is pointed right now. Yes, he's skipping the first 4, believing that by focusing on California and Texas, Colorado, Alabama, Arkansas, places like that, he could amass enough delegates to become a contender into the later rounds. That strategy works, again, if he hits 15% on Super Tuesday or more, and also if after these first 4 we emerge with 2 or 3 people who have won 1 or 2 or 3 of these states. If Biden prevails here tonight, does well in New Hampshire, and wins South Carolina outright, it makes it harder for Mike Bloomberg to justify being the more moderate, middle-of-the-road, potential crossover candidate for independents and Republicans. But if Bernie Sanders wins here, wins in New Hampshire, wins Nevada, thanks to Latino support, and then Joe Biden wins and a chastened Joe Biden wins in South Carolina, Super Tuesday voters may turn and say, well, wait a second. Biden hasn't been able to beat Bernie Sanders. Maybe Bloomberg can. Maybe we should support him. So lots of ifs, ands, and buts there for Bloomberg to consider. But it's one possible strategy. Nobody's been able to test it before. You can only really do that, it seems, if you've got at least $52 billion to your name.
Precisely, Ed.
So very few people will ever test that except somebody like Mike Bloomberg.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.